All right. Good morning, everybody. This is Aaron Tomlinson. Welcome to Sunday Morning Live. It is Mountain Time, about 10:07 a.m., I think. I don't know what clock to trust and what clock not to. Okay, I've been doing this with cell phones that are connected to the internet all the time, Wi-Fi, whatever, for decades, probably. I don't know, a lot of years. So I should know when it's daylight savings, what time it is. But it's almost more confusing because I still have clocks that aren't apparently connected to Wi-Fi or internet that give me a different time. And I'm used to having to fast forward mine an hour, whatever. All that to say that I woke up this morning a little bit late, later than usual, even by standard time standards. And I thought, crap, I'm late, or I missed my Sunday Morning Live because I didn't get my clock change. Anyway, I was doing the clock change in my head. So I jumped out of bed and thought, well, crap. Anyway, my clock automatically advanced itself. So give people time to jump on here. Trying to see if I can find comments to turn those on. Let's see, make sure that we get this up in the group on Facebook. So I hope everybody's doing well. I hope, I don't know even who does and who doesn't, as far as internationally, recognize daylight savings or time changes. I don't know if that's just an American thing. You have to forgive my ignorance on that. But I am an American, and so we don't generally keep up with world events and what's happening in other countries like other countries seem to do. At least that's been my experience, certainly. When I've traveled to other countries, there's more global news, global awareness, more of an international awareness than what we have here in the U.S. So anyway, I'm going to see if this got posted. Hope everybody's doing well out there. Yeah, and it looks like I have a few people. Can't see the comments. Actually, I can. Joyce O says 3/7/25. You mean to tell me it's the 9th? You mean to tell me that things go forward instead of backwards? Let me change that. I put 3/7/25 in my title. So I went back a day instead of forward a day, and our clocks went forward an hour. I'm just a mess when it comes to time. But thanks, Joyce. Said you can't see me on Facebook. Yeah, let me do this. I forgot to do one other thing. For some reason, the settings on it get messed up. The privacy settings on it get messed up when I'm going from Restream as well. So that should fix it. So, okay. So, Joyce, thank you for keeping me together this morning. Clearly, I'm struggling with the time change and whatever this morning. So, I want to do something maybe a little bit different today. Maybe not, but I'm going to actually use quite a bit of scripture. I want to look at 3 different Bible stories, but I want to just acknowledge that for many of us, maybe not for all of us, but for many of us, we may be going through a difficult time right now, a time or season where we feel like we don't have enough to go around, maybe because the price of bread and the price of eggs. And, it's crazy to me how much things have gotten expensive, in the sense that at the level that we live at, It's almost like not having any disposable income anymore. And by disposable income, what I mean is just being able to buy something without thinking about it. It used to be that a cup of coffee at Starbucks was $3 or whatever. And now it's like $10 or something. It used to be, when I really noticed this, I was at the grocery store, and of course our grocery bill has gone up, not just because of inflation and the cost of groceries, but also because I have two boys that have hit their teenage years and puberty, and they're eating us out of house and home, two boys at the same time. So we go to the grocery store. We're going to spend easily $400 on food that might last us about 2 weeks. And that's if we're shopping the sales. But I'm waiting in line, and I see a National Geographic magazine with a title that I'm interested in, a topic that I'm interested in. And I pull it off the shelf, and I want to say that sucker was $23.99. I'm like, $23.99, because I thought I could just throw it on there, $2 or $3, maybe $5, and I have this 90-page magazine. No, it's going to be like over $20. Like maybe it was $19 or $18.99. I don't know what it is at your grocery stores, but that's kind of what things are going for at our grocery stores. And my personal observation is that this is probably going to get worse before it gets better, if it ever does get better, in the sense that our wages, what people make, what people get paid for a living, if you don't live strictly off of investments, wages haven't kept up. It's one of the things that I encourage young people with. When we started out, my wife and I, we had a house that we were renting. We were paying $150 a month. You could go to Taco Bell and eat lunch, one person, for about $3. Gas was, I don't know, $1 a gallon, maybe a little bit more. Definitely not $2 a gallon. And we were making, teachers about that time were making, I don't know, $30,000. I was working retail, making $25,000. And now that same house that we were renting, that same house, I just recently looked at it, is renting for over $1,000. And that's pretty cheap. As far as Colorado prices go, Pueblo, where I live, is a lot cheaper than places like Colorado Springs or Denver or Fort Collins. Definitely cheaper than stuff is in the mountains. And so you could rent this place for about $1,000 now. I think last time I checked, last time I took my son to Taco Bell, it was $40 for two people. Gas prices, around $3 a gallon. And it seems to me that things are just going to get worse. This is not a political comment. This is not a political show, or I'm not trying to do anything political, but I don't understand the tariffs. And I think the tariffs are going to make things tons worse. Now, you may think they're wonderful. You may think other countries are going to pay them and not consumers. We'll have to see what happens with all of the economic shakeup that's going on in our country right now. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens. But my forecast, my observation, again, this is not a political statement, just an observation, just the way I'm thinking about it. But my forecast is that things are going to get harder. Things are going to get worse. We're going to struggle more financially. When I think about what my children are going to do for a living, when, the age-old question, what do you want to be when you grow up? I just have to wonder what jobs are going to be viable for them. When I talk to young people today, the idea of owning a home what we used to call the American dream is not available or accessible to most of them. And not everybody can start a YouTube channel and make enough money to survive off of a YouTube channel. Not everybody can be an entrepreneur in the entrepreneurial realm or the YouTube realm. Or even, the financial, I follow a lot of like financial advisors and financial teachers and people that watch the stock markets and the housing markets and stuff like that. That's the kind of stuff I follow on social media. I don't really follow spiritual teachings or that kind of stuff. There's a little bit of that, but not much. I follow sports, and I've shut off all the political stuff. And I follow like that kind of stuff. And there's a lot of them out there doing businesses, channels, whatever, getting rich, teaching you how to get rich. And a lot, at least in my view, a lot of the postings, a lot of the videos, a lot of the lives, this kind of stuff comes across very smug and very out of touch with where a lot of people are at today. And so for a lot of young people, the only way that they can live together or live rent-wise is to create these little miniature communes inside these houses that are going for thousands of dollars of rent every month. And the idea and thought of buying a house is out of the realm of possibility for them right now. And these are college students. And I know it's bad because recently I was listening to a live program on one of the Denver stations, and one of the comments that was made, one of the guests that they had on the morning show was to talk about the thriving housing market and how great housing was and housing availability in Denver. And as they were preparing for the segment, they announced it and they went to commercial, and I was listening kind of incredulously because I'm like, the housing market's good. Maybe there's going to be some good news for people that want to buy houses. And they come on and know the good news was that more and more condominiums, more and more townhouses were being built in the Denver area. And so there were going to be more places for people to be able to rent. It wasn't rent is going down, rent is going to be cheaper. They didn't even talk about that. They didn't even talk about maybe this new supply of condominiums and townhouses and rentals is going to make it easier for young people to rent, or cheaper for not just young people, but anybody that needs housing, anybody with housing insecurities. It's going to make it cheaper for them to rent. No, that wasn't what they were talking about. They were just talking about there's going to be more places to rent. And there was no mention at all of people being able to buy places. And so I don't know what it's like in your neck of the woods. I don't know what it's like in your corner of the world or your state or your place in the nation. But what I'm seeing going up all over the place in Colorado are either these condominiums or these townhouses or these houses that are identical. These houses that are exactly the same, that are stacked on top of each other. So you may have, let's say, 2,000 square feet in this house, but it's a 3-level home. So you have less than 700 square feet on each level. And so it's fairly cramped, even though you have 2,000 square feet. But God forbid, we can't make it wide because that would take more acreage. So we have to stack it on top. And then they're being built one after another, after another, after another. One of the things that I noticed when I went to communist countries for the first time in the very early 2000s was in these communist countries, how everything, every building, every housing project, everything looked the same. When you go to Russia, for example, the Russian language is not written in our alphabet, right? They have their own alphabet. Just going into places like Poland was bad enough because the words are completely different. You can't make out anything. The words are so long and the letters are so mixed together that you can't even say the word in your own head from being an English speaking American person. And so you have to, even keeping track of street signs is hard, is what I'm trying to say. And then in Russia, keeping track of what street you're on is really difficult as well. And so I would look for landmarks in these cities like Warsaw. And I remember being in Warsaw for the very first time, or being in Kiev in the Ukraine, and looking for landmarks and not being able to find landmarks because everything looked the same. All the buildings looked the same. All the cars looked the same. All the streets looked the same. And I remember just being grateful coming back into America and thinking, yeah, we really are blessed. We really are fortunate here in America. And it's one of the reasons that I became really conservative at that time in my politics, was because I could see how poorly communism had worked around the world, or at least in these countries. This is back in 2000. And yet here we are today, building these, like I said, housing projects that are going up side by side. And, and the distance between these houses that are being built side by side, the distance between these houses, the fire codes at the movie theaters require more space between rows of chairs than apparently building codes require between houses. And then these $2,000 or these 2,000 square foot homes that are just like the home next to it, and like the home next to that, and the home next to that, everything just being sort of assembly line, cookie cut, all looking the same. In Colorado Springs, run about $750,000 to $800,000. Aaron, why are you going into all this? Because I do talk to young people every day, and they tell me that their parents and grandparents are really out of touch. That their parents and grandparents like to tell them, when I was your age, I was already doing this, or I was already doing that. And I could be in that situation as well. I've been working on some level of full-time job or more. Most of my life, I've worked more than 40 hours a week. And I have been working more than 40 hours a week since I was 16 years old. That's truth. But I know things were a lot easier. And I know that wages today, what people get paid today, especially at entry-level positions in any field, is not keeping up with the skyrocketing costs of housing and cars and utilities and groceries. Oh, I was going to buy some jeans the other day. I was going to buy a pair of jeans, found a pair of jeans that I liked. $90 for a pair of jeans. I was like, my God. Now, keep in mind, I don't buy jeans very often. I try to buy stuff that's really good quality, shoes, pants, things like this, so I don't have to go out and buy sunglasses. So I don't have to go out and buy them as often, although I lose my sunglasses sometimes. You know what I'm saying? So I'm just saying, if you are unaware of the economic pain out there, if you're unaware, if you're not feeling it yourself because you came up in a time with more opportunity, you came up in a time, or you benefited in some way financially, so that you're in a position right now where you can feel comfortable in this economy, don't look down on the younger generation. Don't judge them. Don't compare your situation to their situation, because they're two completely different worlds. I tell the students that I work with all the time that they are growing up in a completely different world than the world that I grew up in, or the world that their parents grew up in. Used to be that their parents were a little bit older than me. I've been doing this for about 8 years now. Used to be their parents would be a little bit older than me. Now their parents are all a little bit younger than me. these college age kids. So, I just tell them, hey, your parents are living in a different world. In a very real sense, they are immigrants to this world and they don't know it. They don't believe that they are. They don't think that they are. But I'm telling you, this world is so different. And most of us know this, and most of us can acknowledge this, and most of us can acknowledge there's a lot of economic pain out there. And from a political perspective, we can all sit in our sides of the aisle with the left pointing the finger at the right and the right pointing the finger at the left, and everybody blaming somebody. Probably it's all a smokescreen, and probably none of it is being the real causes are not being identified. And if there are people to blame, they're not being held accountable. And the rest of us just sit here as the wealth gap in this country grows and grows and grows and grows. So thank you, Ronald Reagan, and all your policies that have made it so much easier for the super wealthy, to increase that gap between really wealthy and middle class and all that stuff. And again, I really am not trying to make political comments. It's no secret that I lean left. I don't think anybody is going to be shocked or surprised about that at all. But I'm trying to be respectful of the platform and steered away from that. All I'm trying to do is raise awareness of how bad things are out there and how bad things can get. So if you're not feeling the economic pain, we have this interesting sort of weird thing that we do as human beings, at least in our culture, in our societies, where we're always looking outside of ourselves and trying to control and fix things that are outside of ourselves, and being deeply, deeply impacted by the actions of other people, the words of other people, whether or not we're liked, how we're thought of, whether or not somebody agrees with us or disagrees with us. Somebody doesn't agree with our opinion, we take it very personally, and we'll on social media now, we can cancel people really easily with a block button. So it used to be, when I started out on social media, you could have fruitful dialogue with individuals. Now that's viewed as being contentious, that's viewed as being controversial, and people are just really, really quick to block you and cancel you. Now, having said that, I've got a block list that's a mile long. So I'm not pointing my finger at anybody. I'm just trying to say that we do this thing as human beings where I think sometimes we're overly impacted, overly affected by situations and events and people, relationships, things that we cannot control. What I'm trying to do is direct your thinking towards areas of your life that may be frustrating for you, problems, a sense of lack, a sense of loss that you may be experiencing, and how you might be viewing that problem from the perspective of, I've got to fix it by fixing something outside. So in other words, the stress, the problem, the sense of lack, the pain that you're feeling has been caused by your circumstances. Again, it's been caused by the economy. It's been caused by other people. It's been caused by even sickness or disease or the death or loss of a loved one. These are all things that are happening out here, and they are things that really we have very little to almost no control or influence over. And so situations are happening outside of us, and because the cause of what's going on to us is happening outside of us, we frequently become fixated on trying to control situations out there, or we become fixated on the lives of other people. Now, some of us are just flat codependents, and we want to fix other people anyway. We want to rescue other people. We want to control other people, whether it's our kids or our spouse or our neighbor or the person on social media, or we come from a religious perspective where we want people to think like us and act like us and talk like us and follow our set of ethics and live according to our philosophy of life because we got it from God. And so we're really trying to control everything around us and everything outside of us. It's something very interesting that we do as human beings. Something else interesting that I've observed is that it seems to, and again, I don't really watch a lot of other uh, podcasts. I read a lot. A lot of stuff that I read isn't popular, as far as like on topics like spirituality and stuff like that. But one person that I've deeply respected his work for 20 years now is Joe Dispenza. I think I read my first Joe Dispenza book on the evolving brain. I want to say back in the early 2000s, 2006, 2007, something like that. And so I've always appreciated his work. I've watched the trajectory of his career, been completely amazed at the world-changing influence that he has had. Listened and done several of his meditations. My wife has been to his week-long retreats and weekend advances and all of these various different things. And it just seems to me that he's doing all kinds of good in the world. And is a example of I talk a lot about shamanism on this channel. He's an example of a modern day shaman, of a shaman in a Western modern scientific world, what that can look like for people. Anthony Robbins is another person that I have read his books. I think I read Unlimited Power going back to 1999 or 2000 and learned a lot from Tony Robbins. And I came on, some things come up on my Facebook feed. There was a young man who I think left Christianity and then according to him, got involved with all these different things, Tony Robbins, Joe Dispenza, etc. And then got into New Thought, and then had some kind of conversion or reconverting experience that caused him to go back to becoming a Christian again, advocating the gospel message, the Christian message. And he was being very, very negative, very contrary, acting as though New Thought, positive thinking, Joe Dispenza's work, Anthony Robbins' works, all were just completely demonic, completely of the devil, and that these teachings brought him into a place of depression. A couple of years ago, I had a falling out with an individual that I thought was a good friend of mine. But he took issue with me because I was too much into New Thought and too much into positive thing, and it's so toxic. He called the atmosphere that I create as one that's toxic. Now, I don't think I'm a person that pushes or advocates toxic positivity, and I do believe that there are benefits to realistic thinking, and realistic thinking isn't always unicorns and rainbows. It isn't always positive. I think that I've been pretty clear on here that from my perspective and my point of view, I want to live my life in a way and encourage other people to live their lives in a way, if they want to, that allows them to embrace and honor every vibration, every emotional experience. I don't feel a compulsive pressure to just be love and light all the time, or to be in peace and joy all the time, or otherwise, there's something wrong with me. That's just Christianity leftovers as far as I'm concerned. But for whatever reason, this person decided that my atmosphere was too toxic because I was too positive and I wasn't giving people space to feel their emotions, etc. and so on. I don't know where that comes from. That's certainly not the case if you talk to my clients at all. Anyway, moving on, Aaron. So, here's what I want to say. But there's this sort of smug idea out there that if we want anything physical, if we want anything tied to money, if we want anything tied to wealth, if we want to better our lives by trying to apply spiritual principles, like stuff maybe that Joe Dispenza teaches, or spiritual principles that people like Neville Goddard and William Walter Atkinson and others taught from the the New Thought movement, or Norman Vincent Peale, The Power of Positive Thinking, or the Law of Attraction, the movie The Secret and the Law of Attraction. If we want to use that in order to manifest a new car, we want to use that in order to manifest a better place to live, or opportunities for more vacations. Abraham Hicks is another one that comes to mind. And there's this sort of, it's the same spirit that I saw in the church. It's the reason I wanted to get away from the church, because people just like to diminish our humanity, not just from the standpoint of it's okay to be angry. You don't have to forgive everybody. You don't have to have a compulsive need to forgive everybody, because that's the secret sauce that's going to take away all the problems in your life. Just realizing that it's all an illusion and we're all one, and just forgive. That's the secret sauce that's going to fix everything. And yet I wonder how much these people have actually sat with over and over and over again, people who have suffered real trauma and real difficulty and real hardship in their lives. At this point in my life, it's safe to say I have sat individually, one-on-one, listening to these stories of thousands of people. So yeah, I get a little worked up at your anyway, I get a little worked up. But we come up with this idea that somehow it's unspiritual to experience anger. It's unspiritual to grieve. It's unspiritual to not forgive. But also it's very, very unspiritual to want to attract cars or attract wealth or attract money, because this is not a real, true spiritual path. And again, I don't know where they're getting this. Is it a carryover from Christianity? Did they go into Eastern religions and understand Eastern religions better than most people in the West understand Eastern religions, and realize that a lot of the meditation techniques and the yogis that go off in the mountains and stuff like that are trying to get off the wheel of reincarnation by killing every desire and just checking out? And so it's wrong to desire things. It's wrong to want this stuff, because we know, because these super spiritual guys from the East are somehow better than us. They can tell us the right path spiritually to be on. I was talking to Joe Mashuda. I don't think he's mind me saying this. Talking to him yesterday, and he said that he always thought an expert was somebody that came from 20 miles away. An expert is just someone who's 20 miles from home. A lot of truth to that. If somebody travels a distance, then we think they're an expert. And when it comes to spirituality, especially in the 60s and 70s, right, the more foreign they are to our culture, the more the more different that they are, then the more air of authority they must carry. I've been to enough New Age fairs to know that the people who break out the costumes get the longer lines to get readings and energy work and stuff like that. I remember there was a guy at this New Age fair. I am not criticizing him. Again, I am making an observation. He had a long white beard. I mean, he looked like Gandalf. He had a long white beard, and he was wearing this sort of ritual robe, and I think he might have even had a staff. And he was doing energy work or readings or something. And literally, his line was backed up out the door. People there wanting to see him. Now, maybe he was some guru that I'd never heard of that had a real popular following. There's all kinds of things to get popular followings that I'm completely out of touch with. I remember one time anyway, moving on. I don't want to go there. But just stuff that I'm not aware of. It's possible, or it's just that the more mystical they look, the more the farther away they are from us, the more outside of our culture that they seem to be, then they must be experts. They must be experts on meditation. They must be so what I'm saying is I don't know where this comes from, but I really want to come at and just say, listen, it does not make you unspiritual if you want increase in your life at all. It does not make you unspiritual if you have passions and desires, that somehow trying to kill your desires is not this secret sauce that's going to end your suffering. With all due respect to the Buddhists out there, that path may be working for you. It may have worked well for you. Ironically, I do know a lot of people who spent their lives accumulating a lot of wealth, and that wealth did not satisfy them. And so later in their life, they got into Buddhism, or they got into some form of Eastern meditation like Zen meditation and whatever, and practicing Buddhist principles. And they say that they're a better person, that they're a happier person, that they're more peaceful. Great, fantastic, awesome. I'm really happy for you. What I'm taking issue with is not Buddhism and not Zen and not these other spiritual paths. What I'm taking issue with is when we start to say, my way is the only way, my way is the right way, my way is the best way, and try to impose that, be it directly like evangelical Christians, or indirectly by taking shots and saying, oh yeah, it's okay if you're using the law of attraction for some of these material things. However, it's not really a spiritual path, and it's not really going to satisfy what's going on inside of you, and it's not what's going to fill that hunger. That may be true for you, and it may be true for you because you're living at a level of privilege that other people don't have. But even if you are living in a level of privilege that other people don't have, you got 5 cars and you want another car, ain't nothing wrong with it. If that's your authentic desire, you may have 10 houses and may want another 1 or 2. Nothing wrong with it. There is nothing wrong with increase. There is nothing wrong with wealth. There is nothing wrong with anything in this human experience. And so I'm just out here trying to say, hey, let's stop telling people that you, as long as you're walking in love all the time, as long as you're manifesting light all the time, as long as you're forgiving everybody in your life for everything that they ever did to perpetuate your own codependency and toxic relationships, which is really what that does. But hey, Jesus said you need to forgive everybody for every offense, or and again, I don't resonate with A Course in Miracles. It's my understanding from, reading it years ago, that A Course in Miracles teaches this whole thing of forgiveness. That's the core of it. I posted a video. Some of this I'm coming at because I posted a video in the New Day Global Group Facebook page from an author that I deeply, deeply respect, love his work, Mitch Horowitz. And Mitch has really gone after this thing, and he's been canceled by all kinds of people because he's dared to challenge the ubiquitous necessity of forgiveness for every person, every situation. Do I believe in forgiveness? Absolutely. Do I think forgiveness is important to mental health? Absolutely, in some instances. Do I believe that forgiveness is necessary for long-lasting relationships? 100%. Can't get around it. Definitely something that we need to do. Do I think it's a spiritual imperative or some kind of command from some God somewhere that says that you have to forgive everybody for everything that they did against you in your life? Absolutely not. I think that you can take your hurts and you can channel that in effective ways. I think that the imperative to forgive has kept people in abusive marriages, abusive relationships, toxic churches, cults with cult leaders. I think it can be a very, very toxic teaching. Can it be a helpful teaching? Yes. Has it helped a lot of people? Yes. Can it be very toxic from my perspective as a clinical mental health professional? Absolutely, it can be very toxic. So what I'm saying is it's okay to have your experiences. It's okay to be frustrated right now. It's okay to be upset right now. It's okay to have desire for something more right now. That's all I'm trying to say. Now, let me get into what I wanted to get into today. I want to get into what I wanted to get into today. I want to look at 3 stories just quickly from the scriptures. And I'm not looking at these from the perspective of this is the authoritative word of God, and this is how it is. Not doing that at all. But I'm also not going to throw the Bible out. It's something that I know really well. I spent 30 years of my life in this book, studying this book, learning things from this book. And I do believe that for all of its faults and all of its flaws and all the nonsense, which goes back to the other videos that I've been talking about, I do believe that these are collections of myths and stories, and that there is tremendous wisdom. There's tremendous wisdom in these stories. There's ancestral wisdom. There's ancient wisdom. I want to honor the faith of I want to honor my ancestors by honoring the faith of my ancestors. And I know that in my ancestral tree and line, Christianity played an important role. And it wasn't all toxic. It wasn't all just trying to govern them, or, this evil thing that we make it out to be sometimes. No, it was things that they taught their children, again, forefathers, but their children, to give them hope in difficult times, to give them a resource to get through life. And I want to take back a lot of the negative stuff that I've said about Christianity, especially the last couple of years. And I want to be able to honor my ancestors. You cannot curse the roots, but bless the fruit. And that's part of our problem. We think we're completely disconnected and not a part of something. But anyway, that's a whole other milk cart for me to get on. So anyway, so I want to look at 3 stories, and I want to look at it from this perspective. The first one, they'll be familiar stories for you. The title for today's teaching I called it, what do you do when your brook dries up? What do you do when your brook dries up? And 1 Kings 17, we know the story, some of us. Elijah is a prophet. He goes to the king of Israel and announces a famine in the land, that there's not going to be rain. And then he goes to a ravine, and he sits there. As one of the Bible stories I remember my mom reading to me as a kid. And ravens would come and bring him food. The birds would come and feed him while he's sitting by this brook, and he would drink from the brook, and he would eat the bread and the meat that the ravens brought him. And in about verse 7 of 1 Kings 17, it says, sometime later, the brook dried up because there had been no rain in the land. Then the word of the Lord came to him and said, go at once to Zarephath in the region of Sidon and stay there. I have directed a widow there to supply you with food. So he went to Zarephath, and when he came to the town gate, a widow was gathering sticks, and he called to her and asked, would you bring me a little water in a jar so I may have a drink? And she was going to get it, and he called, and bring me, please, a piece of bread. As surely as the Lord your God lives, she replied, I don't have any bread, only a handful of flour in a jar and a little olive oil in a jug. I am gathering a few sticks to take home and make a meal for myself and my son, that we may eat it and die. And Elijah said to her, don't be afraid. Go home and do as you have said, but first make a small loaf of bread for me from what you have. Make a small loaf of bread for me from what you have, and bring it to me, and then make something for yourself and your son. For this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says: the jar of flour will not be used up, and the jug of oil will not run dry until the day the Lord sends rain on the land. So she goes out. She does exactly what the prophet tells her to do, and exactly what the prophet said is what happened. So next story. I want to show you a pattern here, not just from one story, but a pattern. 2 Kings chapter 4 says, the wife of a man from the company of the prophets cried out to Elisha. So we got the prophet Elisha now. He said, your servant, my husband, is dead, and you know that he revered the Lord, but now his creditor is coming to take my 2 sons as his slaves. Elisha replied to her, How can I help you? Tell me, what do you have in the house? Your servant has nothing there at all, she said, except a small jar of olive oil. And Elisha said to her, go around and ask all your neighbors for empty jars. Don't ask for just a few. Then go inside and shut the door behind you and your sons. Pour oil into all the jars, and as each is filled, put it to one side. She left him and shut the door behind her and her sons. And they brought the jars to her, and she kept pouring. And when all the jars were full, she said to her son, bring me another one. But he replied, there's not another one to bring. Then the oil stopped flowing. So she went and told the man of God, and he said, go sell the oil and pay your debts. You and your sons can live on what is left over. And then finally, I want to use a New Testament story, one that's very familiar to us, I'm sure. I want to talk about Jesus multiplying the loaves and fishes. This is an interesting one to me because it's the only miracle that's consistently told in all four of the Gospels. It's the only one that we find in all four of the Gospels. This is not by accident, by the way, because remember, the Bible was put together by the church. And so this story of the multiplication of bread, specifically Jesus giving thanks, when he gives thanks, it's where we get the word Eucharist from. So this was seen as relating to Jesus and the church mass. So that's why it's in all four of our Gospels. But it's interesting. It says sometime after this, John chapter 6, it says sometime after this, Jesus crossed the far shore of the Sea of Galilee, and a great crowd of people followed him because they saw the signs that he had performed by healing the sick. Then Jesus went up on the mountainside and sat down with his disciples. The Jewish Passover festival was near, and when Jesus looked up and saw a crowd coming toward him, he said to Philip, where shall we buy bread for these that they may eat? He asked this only to test him, for he was already had it in mind what he was going to do. And Philip answered him, it would take more than a half a year's wages to buy enough bread for each one to have a bite. Another of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, spoke up. Here is a boy with 5 small barley loaves and 2 small fish. How far will they go among so many? So Jesus said, have the people sit down. And there was plenty of grass in the place, and they sat down, and about 5,000 men were there. And Jesus then took the loaves, gave thanks, that's where you get Eucharist, and distributed to those who were seated as much as they wanted. He did the same with the fish. When they had all had enough to eat, he said to his disciples, gather the pieces that are left over, let nothing be wasted. So they gathered and filled 12 baskets with pieces of the 5 barley loaves left over by those who had eaten. All right. 3 stories of lack, 3 stories that involve, at the very least, oil, right? 3 stories that have boys in them, sons, children, 3 stories that have children in them. The first story, there's famine. And Elijah's in lack, not just the widow, but Elijah is in lack because his brook has dried up. And so God tells him, go into this city, and I have a widow woman there who was outside of Israel, outside of the covenant, not one of God's covenant people. And I've commanded her to provide for you, which is an interesting little twist, but I don't want to get off on that rabbit trail. So Elijah goes into the city, and he asks the widow to bring him some water and some food. And she says, I don't have any food. All I have is a little bit of flour and a little bit of oil. I'm going to make one last meal for my son and myself, and we are going to die. So we see a pattern of little being multiplied in a time of lack. We see a pattern of a child, a boy, me and my son. And then we see a connection being made with a prophet or a healer. In this case, it's Elijah. Then we look at the story of Elisha. The debtors are coming. The debtors are coming, and they're going to take away my sons. Something is about to happen. that is going to take away my sons. In the case of Elijah and the widow, it was a national famine. The nation was in lack, and obviously she could not control the weather. With the widow, the creditors, those that exist in a higher economic stratosphere of her day because they were able to lend money with interest. So a class that she was not a part of economically was taking what little that she had to survive and was going to come and take her future, her hope for the future, her two sons. So once again, we see lack, circumstances beyond this woman's control, just like with the widow that Elijah took care of. We see boys, children, sons, and she has a little in her house. She's a little bit of oil. She has to borrow vessels. She doesn't even have vessels, anything to put more oil in. She goes in, she closes the door, and there's a miracle of multiplication that starts to happen and take place. Jesus feeding the 5,000 men. I think it's interesting how we say Jesus fed the 5,000, Jesus fed the 4,000. But in reality, that's a very patriarchal view. There would have been more there if this story actually happened. So, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what you think. You can be completely atheist. Let's look at the pattern and the wisdom here. So Jesus says, where are we going to go to get what we don't have? So lack. It's interesting to me that in all of the stories about feeding the multitudes, the implication is that they have enough money in their treasury to feed thousands of people if needed. So this idea that Jesus was just a pauper and poor and mirrored the life of some of the yogis from the East is just not accurate in those passages anyway. Just a side note. So, but they're in a space of lack. We have to fulfill a need, in this case for other people that we want to take care of. So he says, where should we go to get food? And then Andrew, I think it said in the story, brought a boy, a child, a son, who had a sack lunch. And Jesus takes that and multiplies that so that everyone is provided for. So there's definitely a financial aspect, a provisional aspect, taking care of the basics of life in all three of these stories. There's definitely some things that they have in common. In each story, there is a little that is multiplied in order to meet the need that is much bigger than the little that they have. In every story, something miraculous happens. In every story, the person makes a connection with spirit or a shaman, Elijah, Elisha, Jesus, someone who has a line, if you will, to God, right? In each case, there is a child. Child can represent a lot of different things here. I already mentioned how it can represent the future and the hope for the future. But I think there's something else we can see in that I'll get to in a minute. But it seems to be teaching the same primary lesson. And some people would say, well, it's teaching faith in God. And yes, I suppose that's true, but I think there's more to it than that. Because in each case, the man of God asks the person with the need the question, what do you have right now? What do you have in your house? Now, what they have in all three cases is not large enough to meet the need. But in all three cases, surrendering what they have is the key to increase, is the key to getting more. In other words, here's what I'm saying. Elijah did not create bread out of whole cloth, out of nothing, in order to feed him and the widow. He had to start with what she had. In order for her to step into the increase, she had to start with what she had. Elisha, he asks the widow, she's coming, same situation, I need help. And he says, what do you have in your house? And so the miracle starts with what she has. He doesn't seem to benefit at all from this story. I mean, I know televangelists have used this story, and pastors and preachers, to raise money for themselves. Elijah's story is the only one where the prophet himself profits. In the case of this woman with Elisha, although it can be argued that she did take care of him when he would come through, provide for him, he doesn't benefit from the increase of oil, but he tells her to start with what she has. And then in the case of Jesus, he's getting his disciples to look at what they have. Where shall we go to buy food for these that they may eat? So they look at what they have. They have a little boy and a little bit of lunch. So Jesus didn't command the stones that they become bread. He didn't, like Moses, because they criticize. They talk about this later on in John 6. I was going to say they criticize him, but I don't think it's necessarily this part. It's criticism. But after he does this miracle, they say Moses gave us manna in the wilderness. So this isn't like the manna story where there was nothing to eat and God just sent rain of bread and manna from heaven. Something out of nothing. In each one of these cases, the pattern here is, what do you have in your house? What do you have? Well, what I have is not enough. What I have is not going to be sufficient in any way, shape, or form. But they had to start, but it was the substance out of which their provision would come. It was the substance out of which multiplication and increase would come. So we have that main thing in common, starting with what you have. Look at what you have in your house. What do you have? Even if it seems small, even if it doesn't seem like it's enough, what do you have? The other thing that we see in all three of these stories is the presence of a child. Now, one could argue that the son with the widow wasn't necessarily a small child, and the two sons that were about to be taken away by the creditors were not necessarily small children. And you may be right, but you also could not make a very good argument that they were not, because we don't know. The point is, children and the boy. So you start with what you have, and you have a child. So Aaron, what does this have to do with everything we talked about? Well, I already kind of set the stage for us. There may be future financial difficulty that's coming, future lack that's coming. The creditors may be coming to take away your future. Your brook may have dried up. You may have lost a job. Maybe it's not got enough water and bringing enough ravens. Or maybe your brook is a relationship. Maybe your brook is more of an internal experience where something has gone on mentally and emotionally with you, or even spiritually with you, that what used to feed you isn't there anymore, or what used to satisfy you doesn't satisfy you anymore. You may be finding yourself in a position where you feel pressed and squeezed on every side. You feel like, what blow is life going to deliver to me today? What fresh hell awaits me today? And you may be looking back and thinking back to better times. You may be remembering a time when your brook was really running, when you had more, disposable income and you weren't worried about the future, when you had more internal satisfaction. You may be sitting there, like I was going to say, with a divine discontent, feeling restless. You may be feeling hopeless. You may be feeling powerless. Whatever the case may be, the trick what this world wants us to do, listen, this is for sure. What this world wants us to do is look at everybody else. They've done study after study after study about social media, particularly Instagram, particularly Facebook, that people who scroll on social media or on their phones, that they are significantly more anxious and depressed than people who don't. They did some recent studies about mobile phones and children with mobile phones, and how just scrolling TikTok and watching these short video shorts, like they have them here on Facebook or they have them here on YouTube, increases ADHD, increases, they can manifest symptoms that are similar to the early stages of dementia. And just 2 weeks away from this kind of scrolling will cause improvement in cognitive function, improvement in attention span, improvement in recall and memory, just by being away from the phone for 2 weeks. Part of the reason that social media can create depression and anxiety is because it really increases FOMO. I'd ask kids, what is FOMO? Fear of missing out. Other people are doing better than I am. How come my life isn't like theirs? Not realizing that you're seeing someone else's highlight reel, literally. So whatever your brook is, whatever it is, realizing that we live in a world, here's the point I wanted to make, that all of the messaging, all of the advertising, and a lot of this is subliminal. How many billboards do you see? How many billboards and signs and advertisements do you see on your daily drive? If you go out and drive or if you commute, how many restaurants trying to get your attention, or stores trying to get your attention, or billboards trying to get your attention? Not to mention if you listen to any kind of radio that has advertising, or podcasts that have advertising, what that's going on in the background. So I'm not paying attention to the signs that I'm passing, and I'm not paying attention to the radio program, commercial, radio, podcast, whatever, commercials that are coming on as I'm driving. All of this is background, but because it's in the background, it's what we might call subliminal. And so there's a lot of subliminal messaging that is getting into your subconscious that is telling you you need more. You are not enough. You don't have enough. That we are constantly being told about lack and problems and difficulties. We were not wired as human beings to know about everybody's problem around the world 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. One of the worst things that ever happened to us was a 24-hour news cycle. And then if you look at the way politically that these news cycles are leveraged in order to anger us at the other side, in order to create fear, in order to create a sense of lack, so that we end up in this place of feeling like either we don't have enough or what we have is insufficient, especially when we compare it to someone else. Sometimes what we have can be very sacred. Sometimes what we have can be very special, but we dishonor it. We don't see it as sacred. We don't see it as special. We don't see it as valuable, or at least not as valuable as it could be, because we're so busy looking at what we think other people have and thinking that in order for us to make it, in order for us to do well, we have to be like other people. We have to have what other people have. I was talking to Michelle Cohen a couple weeks ago, and she talked to me about this thing of what they call mimetic desire. That I'm not desiring something because I really need it. I'm desiring something because I think everybody else has it and everybody else wants it. And so that's the game. That's the trick. That's the way they make money. If they don't create a sense of lack in you, like you've got to keep up with the latest styles. You've got to keep up with the best cars. You've got to keep up with all of these various different things, all this messaging coming at you. And so we have desires then that can be created by that. We have a sense of lack then that can be created by like that. We have a sense of powerlessness that can be created like that, that causes us to completely miss, devalue, and minimize what we actually have, what we have in our house. And there are times for sure that what we have in our house isn't enough. And there are times when our brook dries up and it's time to move on. And there's nothing wrong with spiritually moving on from a belief or a promise or a vow. This is why I think in the New Testament, in the book of Matthew, Jesus forbade the taking of oaths, because it binds you to something, and life is fluid and life changes. And so you may have been bound to something that has dried up for you, and you're staying there out of obligation, you're staying there out of loyalty, you're staying in that place out of fear, out of the fear of failure, out of the fear of making the wrong decision. And so we try to paint over our lives. Sometimes we try to put a facade over our lives. Sometimes we try to put lipstick on a pig, right? With our life stinks and it's horrible. Nothing against pigs. I hear they're wonderful animals. But we try to dress it up. It's just a metaphor. We try to dress it up and make it look better, not even to the outside world, but make it look better to ourselves, so that we don't feel this quiet desperation that we have going on the inside of us. But the way we get tricked, the trick is, and I'm using the term trick to mean the way we get fooled, the way the trickster comes along and messes with our brains, wherever that trickster comes from, is we begin to feel like we are not enough. We begin to feel like we do not have enough. We begin to compare our lives to situations and other things, compare our lives to where we were a few years ago, compare our lives to other people around us, even if it's just people on social media. But all of this creates this sense of lack. All of it creates this sense of devaluing. I had a dream recently to illustrate this point, and part of the reason I'm talking about this is because I'm encouraging myself. I'm encouraging myself in the Lord today. I had a dream recently, and I'm looking for a pair of jeans. Ironically, I talked about jeans earlier. See that subliminal messaging? It's a few nights ago, but I'm looking for jeans, pair of jeans, and because I have to have them to wear them, and I've got like this desperation. I have to find this pair of jeans, and there's this table with all these different jeans on there, and I can't find the pair that's mine. So I decide that I'm going to grab somebody else's, and when I grab somebody else's, the sizes are too big for me, and they don't fit me. And even the clerk, the lady that's there, says that size isn't going to fit you, and I have to put them down, and I'm having all this trouble in a dream looking, well, what did I do with my pair? Where is my pair? That would lead one to believe. And I know nobody wants to imagine this. Nobody wants to think about this. Nobody wants to see this, not even in their minds. Shake the etch and sketch. But that would lead you to believe that in the dream, I'm not wearing any pants. And so I'm trying desperately to find, you ever have one of those dreams? This was not that dream. In the dream, I am wearing a pair of jeans. But yet I'm desperately needing to find another pair, or find my pair, find a pair that fits. And so the interpretation of that was very obvious to me that I have become tricked into thinking that I need something when I already have what I need. See it, I'm sharing this because it's a good metaphor to explain. Maybe your genes are holy, maybe they're cutoff genes, maybe you've had them for years. Maybe what you have right now financially isn't enough. Maybe you're in a situation like the woman where the creditors are about to come and take your stuff away, literally. Well, it's not going to help you then if someone smugly tells you that the law of attraction is bullshit or not spiritually enlightened enough, satisfying enough, and fulfilling enough for you. That's not going to help you, is it? If you're in that situation. And if you take that kind of attitude and have that kind of thinking, I want you to think about how that's not going to help that person. My point is, we can be facing legitimate lack, meaning I don't know where I'm going to live. I don't know how I'm going to eat. Or we can be experiencing created lack in the sense that we feel like what we have is insufficient, or it's not enough, or we are not enough. We can feel like we are not enough, right? And so the answer in all three of these situations begins by taking stock of what you already have, taking inventory of what you have, and not despising it, not judging it. The widow had judged. All I have is a little bit of flour and some oil. Here's her judgment. I'm going to make a small meal for me and my son. We are going to eat it, and then we are going to die. She's forecasting a future based on her belief that what she had was insufficient because she could not see what was about to happen, because what was about to happen was serendipitous. She was about to meet a prophet. She was about to find her answer. She was about to have something that would multiply, that would not only feed her and the prophet for that day, but would take care of them through the rest of the famine until the situation and the problem was over. But she could not see it because she had made judgments, and she was forecasting a future that was full of worst case scenarios. Internally, if you will, a lot of us have what I call a Google page of doom. I actually took this from my sister, Jackie. We used to call it a Rolodex of doom. It's, I figured out pretty early on that the kids didn't know what a Rolodex was, but they didn't know what a Google search was. And so we talk about not doom scrolling, not looking out here, although that's not good to do either, but internally, inside, scrolling inside, putting in our search engine, what is my future going to be? How is this situation going to work out? What is going to happen here? And then we just have page after page after page come up of worst case scenarios, and then internally we click. This is a metaphor. We click on those. In other words, I'm talking about running worst case scenarios through our imagination. That's what she's doing. We're going to eat this and we're going to die. And the thing is, it makes perfect sense. Within the limits of physicalism, it makes perfect sense. With her understanding of the world and the way it works, even as we read the story, our understanding of the world and the way it works, her judgment appears to be accurate. It appears to be correct, and yet she was completely wrong. She didn't know that she was going to run into Elijah that day. She didn't know that she was going to have fortune, good fortune, serendipitous encounters that were going to come her way, and she almost missed it. She almost missed it. The widow that goes to Elisha, where the creditors are about to come and take her sons, she looks outside of her situation for help. And she knows where to go. So Elijah shows up for the widow. The widow goes and finds Elisha. She's looking outside for help. And when she comes, what does he do? He turns her back to, what do you have in your house? In other words, I've got to get to the prophet. I've got to get to the man of God. I've got to get to that foreigner that's more than, or that expert, I'm sorry, that expert that's more than 20 miles away. I got to find somebody with the answers. I've got to read another book. I got to watch another video. I got to go to another conference. I got to try a different type of meditation. Listen, there's nothing wrong with going to conferences, nothing wrong with reading books, especially if your brook has dried up. However, in this case, while she's looking outside, the prophet turns her back to what's inside and says, what do you have in your house? What do you have in your house? She also devalues it. She says, I don't have anything but this jar of oil. She says, okay, go out and borrow from your neighbors, but then go into your house and shut the door. Go into your house and close the door. And when she focused on what she had, she began to honor what she had. She began to see increase. See, here's the thing. In order to see increase, the widow had to give to Elijah first. Elisha is getting this widow to see increase by getting her to borrow the empty vessels. Because by borrowing the empty vessels, she can begin to imagine them being full. It makes no sense to borrow empty vessels to sell oil back to your neighbors when you have no oil to begin with. This is the place of staying stuck. This is the woman who's stuck. This is the woman who can't move forward, or the man who's stuck, the man who can't move forward. God, I've been there. Can't move forward, devaluing what's in your house, even if it's just what's on the inside. Jesus takes the loaves and the fishes from the boy, and this brings me to the last part of the pattern. So the first part is, look at what you've got. Stop devaluing what you've got. And you can apply this on whatever area works for you. You can develop an attitude of gratitude because you're not in a position where you're about to lose everything. Or if you are in a position that's you're about to lose everything, you may have to go within. You may have to go in here. Whatever your case may be, not trying to be insensitive to. I'm not trying to give you easy answers. I'm just saying shifting the focus appears to be a key to the miraculous here. Shifting your focus, going within your house could be going within your own physical body. This is the house of the soul. So it could be looking at what you have possession-wise, or it could be developing an attitude of gratitude from inside, having come from a family where we did lose our home to creditors. We did lose our cars to creditors when I was 16 years old. I did watch my family move out of their house and not have enough space to take everything with them, and to have to leave things in that house and move into a trailer and not know, and have to beg, literally beg, in order to get just the most basic provisions. I've been there. I've seen it. I've seen it happen to people that I love. And my mom, one of the things that she always talked about, and we found in several different places of her things after she passed and after she died, was she did keep a gratitude journal. And sometimes when we'd read that gratitude journal, sometimes it would just be, I'm thankful for my children. I'm thankful for Aaron. I'm thankful for Lori. I'm thankful for Jackie and Jamie. I'm thankful for their spouses. I'm thankful that today I can breathe. I'm thankful that I woke up this morning. I'm thankful for my job, and my mom's job at the time paid her nothing. It was really bad. And she was working 2 jobs. I'm thankful that I get to get up and go to work with my 2 jobs today. I mean, my mom, literally, there were points when she had nothing, and she'd had stuff before. The brook had dried up. but she was able to maintain that attitude of gratitude, and it got her through. I'm not trying to make you feel guilty if you don't have an attitude of gratitude. Listen, not at all, because I do not. But I don't feel guilty about it. I do feel as though I fall way short of the virtue that my mom demonstrated when going through difficult times. I do hold her in the sense that I hold her in high esteem, but I don't feel ashamed for complaining or whatever, and I don't want you to either. I just am saying it may be time to shift your focus, but then I want to come back to this last point, and then I'll be done. Thank you for hanging in there with me. This last point is the boy, or the boys, the sons. Could be daughters as well. We're looking at a patriarchal period in a sexist book, so it is what it is. But I want you to get the principle. Not only was there something material present, there was something way more important present in all of this, and that was the children. Me and my son are going to eat this and die. The creditors are going to come and take away my sons if I don't get the money to pay them off. But the most important part is the story of Jesus multiplying the loaves and the fishes, because he asks his disciples, where shall we go? Watch this. Where shall we go to find supply? Where shall we go to find food for these that they may eat? And we kind of miss it in the story, but where did they go? They didn't go to a store. They didn't go to the butcher. They didn't go to the flea market. They went to a boy who had a lunch. They went to a boy. They went to a child who had enough to feed himself. So the miracle in this case, this is going to sound blasphemous to my Christian friends. The miracle did not come from Jesus. The miracle came from the little boy. The miracle came from the child. That's where they had to look. That's where they had to look in order to get the increase. Aaron, what are you saying? I'm saying, and again, if you haven't watched the video that I posted from Mitch Horowitz, I'd recommend that you do this. He was my inspiration for a lot of this. All of us still have that inner child. All of us have a child within us. For most of us, that child got lost. We're not connected to that child, and that child is not necessarily connected to us. Aaron, what do you mean by that? I mean our adult self, our adult mindsets, our adult problems, our adult life, the traumas that we walk through as an adult. There's a child inside of us. There's a child in our house, or maybe there's more than one, that somewhere in life got lost, either because of trauma or because of what I'm calling consensus trance. How many of our childhood desires and our childhood dreams have been stolen from us because we were told that it wasn't possible for us? Or we were told that it was wrong to want that. Or we were told that it was wrong to have that. Or we were told that things don't work that way and the world doesn't work that way. And we've told that child inside of us to sit down and shut up, or that child inside of us has gotten lost in a crowd. So we live out of these adult consensus trances, and we spend our days arguing about politics, arguing about who's right and who's wrong, arguing about the nonsense. straining the net of biblical scholarship, but swallowing the camel and missing the richness of the stories that are actually there, because we're so busy arguing about who's right and who's wrong and what was hidden from us and what was given to us and yada yada, what was kept out of the Bible and how it was. You get the picture. But a child would read these stories with wonder. A child would feed spiritually on these things. And so what am I saying? I'm saying that you need to look at what you have. If you want the miracle of multiplication, you have to look at what you have. You have to start to honor what's in your house, even when it's not enough. And you have to reconnect with that child that's inside you that has a lunch. What does the lunch represent? The lunch is what feeds us when we get hungry, right? Elijah had to leave the brook because the brook had dried up and the ravens were no longer bringing him food. So there was no longer supply for what he was hungry for. And he had to move on. The little boy, unlike the rest of the crowd, had enough to eat to satisfy himself. And so Jesus takes what the little boy had that would satisfy his own hunger, and he begins to multiply it. And so I believe the message in the story is that we can connect, and we need to connect with what the child in us wants. Again, in Mitch's presentation, what did you want before peer pressure took it from you? Though many of us are friends with Kyle Butler, if you follow Kyle Butler at all, Kyle talks a lot about what he wanted as a little boy, and he became convinced that he needed to become a preacher. And so he succumbed for part of his life to the peer pressure of being a preacher and let go of the dreams that he had as a little boy. And his healing, his brook dried up, but his healing and his provision came when he found and reconnected with that little boy on the inside. His story is amazing. Connected with that little boy on the inside, connected with those desires on the inside. Because there's magic in those. There's power in those. There's the ability to have multiplication. So here's what I'm saying. Here's what I'm proposing that these stories are teaching us. What I think these are teaching us is that when we're facing these times like we are now, when we're facing very turbulent times, when we're facing times where there is a lot of lack, when we are facing times of change, we are facing times of drought, when our brook has dried up, that our tendency is to get locked into our thinking of how the world is, future forecast disasters for ourselves, and dishonor what's actually in our house. We start looking outside at what we can control. I need to control other people. I need to get other people to vote right. I need to get other people to think right. I need to get other people to share my opinion. And I think the message is go into your house. What's in your house? I think the message is go inside. What do you find inside? And when you're inside, all that crowded space in there, all those voices that are yapping at you and all those feelings of powerlessness and difficulty, try and find the boy in there. Try and find the little girl in there that still is holding a lunch, that still is holding a desire, a want, a need, which is why I started out the broadcast going really hard at people who say it's not spiritual to want a better car, or it's not spiritual to just want things, material things. What happens if you begin to think it's okay to want those things? It's okay to enjoy those things. It's okay to have those things. But the important part is that you connect with a desire and ask yourself, not is this right or wrong? Not is this the will of God or not the will of God? Is this desire authentic to me? Is it coming from inside of me, or is it some form of mimetic desire? Am I just wanting it because I see that's what other people have? Am I just frustrated because I'm spending so much time watching and looking and comparing myself to other people instead of honoring what I have? Are you like the person in my dream, the dream walker that I had that's wearing a perfectly fine pair of jeans in desperate search of finding another pair, but not being able to find one that will fit? maybe not honoring what you actually already possess. All right. Well, I hope that helps you today. Oh, last part of this, last part. Don't want to forget this part. There is magic in the world. There is a correspondence. Carl Jung called it synchronicities. There is a connection between the inside and the outside. The old Hermetic axiom, as above, so below, as within, so without. Again, Carl Jung called these synchronicities. That when I begin to listen to what I have inside of me, you could even say when I begin to feed the prophet inside of me, I begin to feed the spiritual part of me. I let the prophet inside me, the Elijah inside of me, eat first. I go into my house and look at the oil that I have. I go through the crowd when I'm trying to find a place where these may eat, and I find the little boy or the little girl with the lunch inside of me, and I begin to make those internal shifts. I shift into an attitude of gratitude. Then that change that happens on the inside creates and stimulates and provides change on the outside. And when I control what I can control and I begin to honor what I have and I begin to work on myself, I take my eyes off everybody else and I begin to work on myself, and I begin to shift and change things within myself. And I begin to develop, like I said, feeding the prophet inside of me, feeding myself spiritually, self-care, getting in touch with those desires, asking myself if they're authentic, giving myself permission to have them without any devaluing whatsoever, giving myself permission to feel my feelings without having to be in some high vibrational state. Otherwise, there's something wrong with me. Giving myself the ability to shift and change my beliefs and let go of the ones that aren't working for me and embrace ones that are empowering. This changes your circumstances. This changes your situation. This sets you up for serendipitous provision. One of my favorite quotes in the whole world that I can't remember at this moment. Somebody help me out. Gosh, I'm going to have to quit scrolling so that these early signs of dementia go away. When we commit, when we commit, providence moves too. Yeah, William H. Murray. Until one is committed, there is hesitancy, the chance to draw back, always ineffectiveness. Concerning all acts of initiative and creation, there is one elementary truth, the ignorance of which kills countless ideas and splendid plans. That the moment one definitely commits one's self, then providence moves too. I like this next part. All sorts of things occur to help one that would never otherwise have occurred. A whole stream of events issues from the decision, raising in one's favor all manner of unforeseen incidents and meetings and material assistance. An ad came up, which I was reading it. See what I'm talking about? Let's say this again. A whole stream of events issues from the decision itself, raising in one's favor all manner of unforeseen incidents and meetings and material assistance, which no one could have dreamt would have come their way. I have learned a deep respect for one of Goethe's couplets. Whatever you can do or dream you can, begin it. Boldness has genius, power, and magic in it. I hope this helped you today. I hope this encouraged you today. That really is what I was hoping for, the bottom of my heart, for you. Thank you for joining me. God bless you, and I will see you next.